Good afternoon, Chuck Morse, Left Right Radio with Chuck Morse on Facebook Live, also today on Periscope Live. Welcome to the program. You're welcome to join me. If you happen to be watching on Facebook, you just click on the code and you'll be up with your voice. And if you like, you can be seen. It's amazing, this technology. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted by what you can do now. I'm able to do a radio show without the benefit of a radio station, which is, of course, an extraordinary thing. I'm enjoying it thoroughly. Scott Lively was supposed to be with me today. He had a bug out of the last minute, unfortunately. I'll have him back another time. I've got a pretty full roster this week of guests scheduled. Check it out every day at 12 noon. I've got people booked for tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. I'm trying to be consistent about doing the program every day at noon. So just moving this a little bit. Sorry about that. So check out the show. No, I really didn't prepare anything. So I just want to talk briefly about the announcement that's being blasted across the Drudge Report in big red letters, and that is that President Donald Trump is announcing that he will be running for re-election in an extraordinarily early time, unprecedented. I think it's something like 700 days before Election Day. Barack Obama had the record previous when he announced it 500 days before Election Day. But it's a great thing. You know, why go through pretense? Everyone knows he's running again. Why not just come out with it and say it? That's Trump's method. That's Trump's style. That's what makes, as they say, Trump. That's what makes him great. You know, he speaks plainly. He doesn't hold it in. His intentions are known. And I think that it generates a certain amount of trust in him from people who understand where he's coming from, whether they like him or not. Ronald Reagan had that quality in many ways. I mean, whether you loved him or hated him, he was a known entity. He stood for certain principles, and he was more consistent, if not very consistent, in terms of upholding those principles. Now, Donald Trump might waffle at times. You know, sometimes he's all in and all out. But for the most part, he has governed very conservatively, which is what I believe this country needs. And I think that is something that most people want, including most liberals who feel that, that they want to see some balance, some equilibrium. They don't want to see the country go completely off the left deep end. And thus you have balance with President Trump. You've got a conservative in the White House basically facing off with an entire left-wing liberal establishment, and that includes most Republicans. And it creates a system of balance, which was the whole idea, the founding principle of our republic, a system of checks and balances, a balance of power. I hope that people support Republicans in the midterm only because we need to give President Trump a stronger hand in terms of carrying out his agenda. It would make him less likely to waffle. It would make it more likely that he will carry out the very, I think, common sense agenda that he articulated going into the election. What is that agenda? Well, it's as much philosophical and cultural as it is factual. And the philosophical idea is one that seems even radical to the establishment. But it's obvious, it's common sense, it's normal, it's natural. And to me, it's an incredible, amazing, almost miraculous thing to see it being articulated and carried out, not just for lip service. And that idea is respect for national sovereignty, the national sovereignty in the case of the United States. We are, after all, Americans. He went to Davos, where people scratched their heads and said, how is he going to talk to all these one world order globalists? Well, his message was clear to them. It was I'm putting America first, but we're not alone. I urge you to put your nations first. That the concept of national sovereignty is a progressive idea. It's an idea. It's natural to the same sense that you watching this program put yourself as a sovereign person first and foremost before anyone else. You have to do that to wake up in the morning. You have to do that to survive. Animals understand this. Plants understand this. It is a natural fact of life. We place ourselves first, our independence, our sovereignty, and our nation ought to reflect what is normal and what is natural to us. And that is by putting a national interest first. We set up nations because we want to protect and advance our individual sovereignty. And thus we put nations together, which are man-made, as a means of coming together so that we can, I hate to use this word, but there it is, collectively develop sovereignty, and do so by giving this nation and agreeing to give this nation certain very carefully prescribed powers. They're things that we can't do on our own. We have to get together with other people and come to agreements or covenants so that we can get these things done. So we can have a national defense. We can have a national generic culture that we can see develop in an atmosphere of freedom that we can admire. President Trump has been accused of being a nationalist, and he is, in the best sense of the word, in the most positive sense of the word, in that he respects the American version of nationalism, which is the nation as a limited governmental entity, one that we can be proud of when it deserves praise, one that we can respect because we respect the basic principles upon which it was established, but one that we watch carefully and we do not trust, because Americans, I think it was Thomas Paine who articulated this message in Common Sense, which was a pamphlet that was published in 1776, and that was the best-selling book in this country at that time. It was the year of the American Revolution, the year of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th. And in that pamphlet, Thomas Paine articulated the idea that government is evil, but yet it's necessary. It is a necessary evil. That is the classic American view. We don't trust government because it's power, but yet we recognize the necessity of government in this imperfect world. So we give government certain responsibilities, and thus, by doing so, protect and defend our own independence and our own destinies. And President Donald Trump not only articulates those principles and has said, if you read his inaugural address, it is a very important and amazing document. You don't hear much talked about that. People don't talk about it, but you have to read it again. I think that this is something that school children ought to be encouraged to read and even memorize. It articulates this very principle. He is taking power back from a government that has usurped power and that has corrupted its role in the world and in this nation by involving itself in extra legal powers. And he's returning those powers to us, the sovereign citizen, where it belongs, because he is just our representative. He's nothing more than that. He is one of us that we basically have decided through an election to place in a position of responsibility for a set period of time, as prescribed by the U.S. Constitution. So President Trump understands that concept, and to an amazing degree, he has fulfilled his mandate as he said he would do when he was elected. He has reduced the size and the scope of agencies of the government that have gone above and beyond their original stated intention, their mission, their purview. And in the process, he has returned basic powers and responsibilities to the sovereign citizen, and he has saved money. He's gotten into developing these agencies in such a way that they are good at what they do, and they are able to do what they do with less money. I mean, this is something that, it's he calls it draining the swamp. It's not going to be easy. It's a very difficult process because you get a lot of people who want to depend on this money, and they want to expand their powers. But it is a work that is laudable. It's a work that's going to improve the general state of our national entity. I mean, of our life, but by reducing the ability of the government to interfere in our private lives, and to allow us as citizens to be sovereign, to exercise sovereign power over our lives, and to thus control our own destinies. He's getting rid of regulations that are unnecessary. He has cut taxes. He reduced the corporate tax, which allows monies to start coming in from overseas so it can be invested in this country. He's negotiating trade deals in a way with foreign nations that favor the United States. And he got rid of that very bad TPP, which would have basically created a permanent trade agreement that we would never have been able to get out of, and that would have hampered American industry. It would have hurt American labor. It would have set back our American way of life. By putting America first, he is negotiating with foreign nations in good faith to develop better trade relations by which there can be free trade in the context of favoring America's position, using our leverage. That's normal. That's what you do. That's a proper negotiation. He has improved America's position in the world. I think that nations now respect the United States more than they did, even though, of course, he doesn't talk, like John Kerry with a full phony British accent and run around trying to get his fat face in the paper every minute. Instead, Rex Tillerson, who's a quiet, thoughtful diplomat who wants to get things done, and he wants to fix things, as he says, because that's his background as an engineer, works to negotiate conflicts around the world, works to improve America's relations with other nations in the world, and the results have been astonishing. We have seen other nations respond, even these globalist nations who don't have much faith in sovereignty, who've been taught to believe that sovereignty is something bad and is something to be rejected. They are responding positively to it because it makes sense, because it reflects natural, normal tendencies in the human being. And so you have a coalition of people, including the Russians, defeating ISIS in Syria and putting radical Islam in abeyance. We're supporting more moderate Muslim countries in the process. We're supporting the state of Israel by establishing our embassy in the capital of the state of Israel, Jerusalem, which is something that should be normal. Any nation has a right to determine its capital. And by doing so, it's given a great boost, both politically and otherwise, to not only the state of Israel, but to America's position as a supporter of the state of Israel. I think that he has improved across the board relations with our allies. I'd like to see him do a little bit more in terms of developing more extensive trade relations with Great Britain and the Commonwealth, so that Britain will be strengthened in its own efforts to leave the European Union, which is a good thing. And we have seen more national-oriented leaders come to power across the world in the best sense. Now, of course, when I say nationalism, as I described it, it is a progressive idea in the American context, in the conservative context, in that we respect our nation, we respect our flag, we respect the symbols of our nation, but we also limit that nation in its purview and in its powers. The left-wing version of nationalism is National Socialism, quite frankly, hyper-nationalism, the nanny state, the state that controls and interferes in as many aspects of our lives as possible, the Sharia state, quite frankly. I hear the left-wing radio hosts talk about Christian Sharia. That's ridiculous. Sharia is more like communism than it is like Christianity. It's total control over the lives of the citizens. There's hyper nationalist. So I mean that's what they're into. I mean I've heard a comment from Dan Rather recently examining nationalism. Really? I wish I should probably try to get him on the show. I wonder if he'd come on with me. Because the left stands for a form of nationalism that Americans reject. And that by electing Donald Trump for the first time, and it's almost a miracle to me, for the first time, certainly since Reagan, possibly in modern times, we have rejected the hyper-nationalist, internationalist world order nanny state that is moving us and trying to move the rest of the world toward some kind of a convergence where there's a multinational entity. So call it what you want. I don't care. I don't think they're not trying to get a formal world government. They're not trying to get a formal new world order. It's not, the Illuminati or any of that. But it is some kind of an international order that would place the United States in the state of being just another providence of the world, where we have become dumbed down. President Trump, speaking of dumbing down, is trying to improve the schools. Betsy DeVos is one of the best cabinet members I've seen. She was a friend of, I believe, at least from what I was told by him, my good friend, the late Dr. Samuel Blumenfeld, who wanted to improve American education and reintroduce concepts that would help our young people think cognitively so that they could be sovereign citizens. They could read using phonics. They could develop an impulse to do basic arithmetic and understand what American culture is and American history and the Constitution. So they could then grow up and become independent, sovereign citizens who could then control, to a very large degree, their own destiny, whether it mean getting into business and becoming super successful, or whether it mean being a beach bum. It's up to them. That's our rights as citizens to make those decisions. That's what education used to be before the change agents and the left-wing behaviorists, starting with John Dewey, got a hold of it and started to turn it into a soapbox to promote collectivism and left-wing socialism. Anyway, so I'm just getting started here, but I'm going to end it right now because there's so much more to say, and I want to save it for other days. I don't want to belabor the issue. I simply want to mention that I am very, very proud of President Trump. I support his movement, and it is a movement. He's not just an ordinary politician. This is a movement, and it is a movement that wants to move America more toward national sovereignty and thus move the individual more toward individual sovereignty, where we can control our own lives and control our own destinies. So anyways, I want to thank you for watching today. Check out my books. They're available at Amazon.com. My column is available at Newsmax.com. This is Chuck Morse. I'm trying to do the show Monday through Friday, 12 noon, so check it out. I have a lot of guests coming up, a lot of interesting things going on. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody. Have a good day.